64%. So people are having to live with other people. Marriage rates, they've gone from 80% of 30-year-olds in 1983 who were married to 47% now. Having kids, gone from 60% to 32%. Population growth is collapsing because people can't afford it. And home ownership for a 30-year-old has gone from 50% to 32%. It just shows that dramatic change that's happened over the decades and why each generation has found it more and more difficult to be like their parents.
So I am 30 years old-ish.
Yeah.
I like to hang on to 30 for as long as I can. What advice would you give to someone like me that's my age, or maybe even younger, mid-20s, as to how to play the game over the coming years to make sure that I don't find myself in a position where I'm having to work 2 jobs, I'm poor, I don't have assets, I don't have anything to show for it? Like if you take it right back to being like maybe, let's say a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, how do you play the game? And when I think about this, I'm thinking like wealth creation, how to then preserve my wealth. Like what's the game?
So the first part of the game is income.
Okay.
Without income, you don't have the cash to do the other things, to invest or to look for. No emotional attachment to my pension plan. And I've got real world problems to solve. I can't buy a house. I can't get married. I can't have kids. So I need to solve these in a shorter time period than my pension. My pension was suitable for a different generation that just needed enough after they stopped working. So I got to solve that. And the answer is investing. Then most people roll their eyes and go, oh, really? Stocks and bonds? It's boring. Yeah, but the world has changed. The world has changed in many, many ways, but it's offered us opportunities, whether it's investing in technology, investing in crypto, that gives us much higher returns, stupidly higher returns in shorter periods of time. Okay, that's magic. That's magic for young people. It may be too risky for their parents, but if you're young and you can take some risk, okay, here's your chance. So now you can build a business, use some excess savings, put them in investments. Well, actually, let's compare it. The S&P 500, and this will be an important number later.
What's the S&P 500?
That's the US stock market. It's the broadest measure of the stock market, and you can buy shares in it. Now, that grows at about 10% a year, 11% a year. So let's imagine you've got your $1,000. Well, 11% a year is going to take you a fucking long time to make any money, right? So it is not worth your time. The financial advisors will say, yes, you must do this, start now. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's just not going to change your life. Okay, then we go to technology stocks. NASDAQ does about 18% a year. Okay, that's starting to add up because these numbers compound after a while. It goes from 1,000 to 1,200, and then, it's another 20% on top of that, 20%. These numbers add up fast. Bitcoin, since 2011, been 145% a year, even with it falling 80% 3 times in the middle of that. So 145% a year, as long as you're in it long enough, okay, now that's really starting to pay off. Get more control of your life. And that is by having savings that are growing. Then you can make the choice. Let's say that example of the person gone from $1,000 to $500,000. Maybe en route, they say, well, I'm going to take some money off the table and put it in my lifestyle bank, and I'm going to buy a house. That's what I've done my whole career. And I find the lifestyle bank, that's the reward. Because now it's like, okay, nobody can take my house away.
So if I'm trying to build wealth, buying a house is not a good idea. It's not the best approach to take to build wealth. You're telling me that it's actually
not wealth.
About psychology and about emotion, the house, and it's not about making myself wealthy. I wanted to read some of the comments that people often post when we talk about these subjects, because I think you're probably the guy to address some of them. I bought a house and it's the best thing I ever did. It launched my mindset in new directions. Remember that having your own space has profound psychological impact and can be life-changing for some that don't live in a healthy environment. I guess that speaks to your point about it being a psychological.
But you would also get the same feeling if you rented that was in a nice place and you knew that, you know, your rent was secure, it wasn't going to go up, whatever it was, and something, and you can find more opportunity. If you're just a generalist, it's really hard because you're competing against average people doing average things, right? If you're just working in an insurance office, I mean, there's thousands of people, plus you're competing with AI. You know, how are you ever going to be something within that? How do you become an expert? Now, you could teach yourself, okay, if I don't mind this industry and I think I know it, maybe I need to learn management skills. Maybe I spend all the time listening to podcasts and learning management. Maybe it's, and that's, I can then manifest my destiny. But as you say, doing something other people aren't doing is a superpower.
Do you know what's really interesting with that is this idea of becoming an expert, I think is critically important. But then there's this other step I found, which is knowing what market to apply your expertise to yield the greatest return. And the very simple analogy I'll give you is for the first portion of my career, I became an expert in social media. Now, with that skill set and expertise, you can do a number of things. You can help a fashion company sell more dresses, and that will yield X return, a smaller return. Then in the second portion of my career, I realized that that expertise was highest value and most rare if I applied it to helping public companies tell their story before their IPO. Because the
candy bars. Well, then you've got to sell massive scale and it's really hard. Or you go through an area that has a very specific group of users, buyers, whatever, and particularly ones that have a lot of money. So let's go back to the house idea again, the guy speculating on houses. So there's two house speculators. There's the guy or girl who's hustling and renting them out, finding the cheap bargain, doing them up, renting, getting the cash flow, doing that. And then there's the guy who's buying a place for 10 million, making it ultra luxury and selling it to the billionaires and flipping it for 50. The difference in the returns is staggering. Why? Because one group is price insensitive. In fact, the more expensive it is, the more they want it. The other group is trying to compete with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the two-bedroom apartment in the city, right? There's thousands of those being done up and sold and everything else. So to your point earlier, the returns are less. But no, if you're doing super high end from about 2010, right now it's a saturated market and we've got AI coming in, but you rode a secular trend in the hyper-acceleration phase.
Yeah.
That's why you did well. So you look for a trend that's big, meaningful, and provable, and use your skill set in that. We've seen something in America. I don't know if you just saw the trend. Finally, the obesity numbers tick down.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, first time in 50 years, obesity starts to fall in the US. Right, this is a Ozempic effect, and it's probably some diet effect. My belief is the more people would take Ozempic, the more they also think about diet and understand that something went wrong for them. And my guess is there is going to be huge opportunities in that trend towards healthy eating. The other one is in an increasingly AI-driven online digital world. There's two things that are going to happen. One, the rise of digital communities. You see this in what you do. I see it in what I do. They become more and more important communities online. They're meaningful for people. The other is the entire flip side. I spend 12 hours a day on Zoom calls. What is the most single valuable thing to me? Nature. Nature and experience.